Hello, everyone, and welcome to my first review of the first episode of What If from Marvel. A little bit of a preamble regarding the What If series, the comic book specifically. What If, as a comic book series, was probably one of my favorite comic book series, as an aside to all the others, because it was a comic book series for nerds. The divergence of events that these comic books depicted in the course of the natural Marvel universe only really had the breadth of impact that they could if you were a nerd about what the quote-unquote real continuity was. So if the comic book said, what if the Venom symbiote took over the Punisher? Or what if the all-new, all-different X-Men team died on their first mission? Or what if the Fantastic Four all had the same power? Or my personal favorite, what if Doctor Doom became the Sorcerer Supreme? Just the title alone would fill the imaginations of anybody who knew the actual events of the Marvel Universe and just make you wonder, like, well, what if that happened? That'd be weird. What would take place? And even before you open the comic book, your mind would race in different directions of, well, since I know what actually happened, what effect would this happen? And then you'd read the artist's and the writer's interpretation of those things. It was a book for nerds, mostly. Now, of course, at the beginning of each issue, they gave you a small summary of what the real events were, usually in some way. But like I say, the full appreciation of it was had by those who really knew the material. And so it was with some trepidation that I watched this very first episode of the animated version of What If. And boy, was I disappointed. Because in this instance, you have to be somewhat of a nerd of the movies for the implications of what's going on here to make sense. Especially as the events roll out. Now, I'm going to try something different than my previous Marvel things. I'm going to be going through still images of the episode itself to sort of illustrate what's going on. As far as I know, this does not get me into any trouble. So we start out as the comic book usually does, with the title being, What If Captain Carter were the first Avenger? As in Peggy Carter. Like, okay, well, that's an interesting divergence. Sure, okay. So they start out with a little summary of the real events, the creation of Captain America in a lab and all that kind of thing, the threat of the Red Skull. But then we jump to this alternate universe where apparently, and they make a very strong point of this, the decision point that created a whole new universe is when Peggy Carter had suggested to her maybe she'd like to wait in the observation booth to watch the experiment. And she said, no, I'll stay here. That was the decision point. She asserted her assertion and decided to stay on the laboratory floor. This was the decision that created a whole new universe, except that it wasn't. Because if you know the movie, and again, this series only makes sense if it diverges from the events in the films, because that's the starting off point. In the film, all of the generals, all of the non-scientists are in the observation booth. Having Peggy Carter go to the observation booth was not some sexist gesture, because the generals and the officials were all up there before she even got there. But the implication here is that, oh, I'm not going to be treated differently than a man, except you're being treated exactly the same as all the men in the booth. But okay, now she's out on the floor. That's supposed to be the big change point in this, except that it isn't. Because nobody is in the booth, apparently. Everybody's on the floor. So there really wasn't any power differential there, if that's what they were trying to imply, which they were, but it didn't work. Now, what is the actual decision point in this? Well, the actual decision point, Peggy Carter's on the floor. They're all sitting around waiting for the experiment to begin. And then Peggy Carter notices this guy. She notices that there's a little cigarette case on the floor, and there's some guy there that's pulling out a lighter. And she suddenly concludes that this is a threat. And she's got to stop it. She's got to stop it. She knows something's wrong. Why does she know something's wrong? I don't know, because here's the thing. In the original film, there is implanted amongst the officials at the experiment a Hydra spy. And the Hydra spy is there to sabotage everything if it works. He's there to observe the experiment, and if it is successful, he is there to destroy everything and assassinate people. But in this instance, no one is in the observation booth, not Peggy Carter, not the rest of the officials, not the Hydra spy. And for some reason, before the experiment even begins, the Hydra spy explodes everything and shoots everybody. Why? I don't know. Apparently, Peggy Carter not going to the observation booth sped up the timetable of the secret Hydra agent sabotage plan to blow everything up before he witnessed whether or not the experiment worked. Anyway, so Hydra agent guy shoots everybody, blows up the lab. Peggy Carter shoots Hydra guy, but Steve Rogers, non-transformed Steve Rogers, has been shot, and he's lying on the ground, bleeding out, presumably. But that's not Peggy Carter's focus. Peggy Carter's focus, as well as Howard Stark's focus, is that they have to proceed with the experiment. This is their only chance to proceed with the experiment. Even though they still have all the serum, that hasn't been destroyed. I mean, the Nazi, or I should say the Hydra agent's plan was an utter failure because nothing of his explosive actually touched the experiment itself or the serum. He did kill Dr. Erskine to prevent any more serum from being created, but he failed utterly in his job because we can't have him actually succeed because that would give Agent Carter nothing to do. But yeah, the focus isn't on saving Steve. Somehow the experiment and the equipment is still operational enough to proceed because Peggy Carter, she has to be in the experiment. She makes herself part of the experiment. Right, that's the only chance they have. That's the only chance they have. So while everything's burning around them and Steve Rogers is bleeding out, Peggy Carter puts herself into the machine and Howard Stark proceeds with the experiment. And here, just for reference, here is our super sexist general guy who's not Tommy Lee Jones, who is girls are bad at every point in this and girls are weak. And also, by the way, all men are useless in this show, if you can believe it. All men. It's not so much a problem when you're beating up a bunch of Nazis, but when even your colleagues and your friends are all diminished down to just sexist, misogynistic stereotypes. Yeah. So anyway, letting Steve Rogers bleed out on the floor, Peggy Carter goes into the machine. You see, here he is. He's just lying on the floor. Oh, sorry, bleeding out. She goes into the machine. He's bleeding out. Oh, my God. The experiment goes, and she comes out an Amazon. Her head is about half the size of it, plus of what it was before. And she's just an absolute giant. It's like, okay, all right, great. So then all the serum is used on her because obviously with the scientist who created it dead and the experiment effectively stopped, you wouldn't want to say, wait a second, that's our only shot at this. Maybe we should back up and like make sure we can replicate the serum before we put it all in the one. No. We have to do it now. We have to do it now. It's our only chance for some reason. So anyway, so she becomes super soldier and sexist general guy is sexist. Like, oh, we can't have this dame go out there and do stuff. Girls and this, that, and the other. And so Peggy Carter does not have to do the USO tour. She just ends up practicing her weights or whatever. Yeah, so she's doing the punching bag thing, like we saw at the in the teaser at the end of Captain America, the first one, and at the beginning of Avengers. And she's there with still rehabilitating Steve Rogers, who will walk with a limp for the rest of his life because of being shot. And so she's using the punching bag and then just randomly throwing weight discs into the wall. because we don't have any kind of establishment like with Steve Rogers back in Brooklyn when he was holding up a trash can as a shield as sort of a foreshadowing of what he might become. She's just throwing around weights into walls because that's how she lets out her frustrations about not being allowed on the front line, etc. And then they're just kind of talking in there about stuff and making their little romance kind of thing. And then we jump to probably the first thing that made me go, oh, this is terrible. I mean, of all the other stuff prior, even before this, I was like the first 3 minutes, we have to do this experiment now with everybody dying and bleeding and everything burning right now. If you remember the film, remember the thing that all of this jumps off of, the film, Red Skull and Hydra find the Tesseract or the space gem at the beginning of the film, long before the experiment takes place. Apparently, this show has decided not only are we going to alter the events based on something that didn't actually alter the events, we're also going to completely change around the chronology of events, which has no explanation as to why they would have changed for this convenience of the story. And you'll see why in a moment. So anyway, at the beginning of the original film is when Red Skull, or Johann Schmidt, finds the Tesseract in the little Norwegian village. But now this event occurs after the experiment that creates the super soldier. So in the first film, in the original film, Red Skull finds the Tesseract. Weeks, some unknown amount of time passes between that and Steve Rogers becoming Captain America, because we have to meet Steve Rogers. He has to go off to the camp. He has to go through the training. Then he has to go into the experiment. Okay, but no, now the Tesseract is found after the experiment. And somehow, some way, American intelligence knows all about this just after the fact, like literally after the fact. Or while it's happening. It's so bizarre. And so he finds the Tesseract, Johann Schmidt does. And apparently the American intelligence already knows the Tesseract exists. They know what this thing is in some book, even before. Yeah. Okay. So now they know that it exists. They know where it's been stolen from. And they also know where it's going to be shipped to. And then we have some more conversation with Peggy and Howard Stark about Howard Stark is sexist and Peggy's smarter than he is. And then Howard Stark gives her, out of the blue, her uniform and the shield. With the British Union Jack on it. So, yeah, so Peggy Carter is handed these things. There you go. Suddenly, here's your uniform. This is what you would have worn if you were out on the USO tour. Except they were never going to send her out on the USO tour because they were going to send Captain America out on the USO tour. Anyway, thank you, John Miller. I am terrible for the thought of Peggy Carter becoming a female Red Skull instead of Captain Amazon. I mean, the doc took a long time to pick Rogers. Yeah. You see, what did Steve Rogers have to go through in order to be chosen for that? Well, he had to show the merit of himself, the merit of his personality, and so on. Erskine had to give his seal of approval, etc. But no, in this instance, right away, it's just spur of the moment. We know who goes in the pod. Right. Well, Peggy Carter must be the next best one. Yeah. Okay. Just there. Erskine's dead at that point, so he doesn't have any input. So anyway, whoops. What did I just do? I'm listening to myself on my own audio. Okay, that wasn't good. Let's see. So then Peggy Carter has her costume. She has the shield. And we're en route with the Tesseract being delivered from being discovered to Hydra. Okay. Again, Hydra has never had the Tesseract to study. I want to make that point very clear here. In the original film, Hydra gets the Tesseract. Some unknown amount of time passes. Captain America is created in order specifically to fight Hydra, who has become some crazy internal superpower amongst the Nazi regime. How did they become a crazy superpower amongst the Nazi regime? Because they has the Tesseract. And what did they do with the Tesseract? Well, they used the Tesseract to create all this crazy technology and weapons and stuff that made them a threat. But in this universe, that never happens. Because Agent Carter intercepts the Hydra convoy carrying the Tesseract, and she beats up all the Nazis in the middle of the street all by herself. Yep. And then big Nazi guy comes up, sort of like in Indiana Jones and the airfield, and he fights Captain Carter, and she kicks him in the nuts. And then she captures Arnim Zola as he's holding the Tesseract before he has any opportunity to use it to develop technology and weapons. So at this point, and because of this, Hydra is a powerless faction within the Nazis. They're just another research group. She hands over the Tesseract. Captain Carter has the opportunity to stop Hydra from becoming Hydra before it even begins, all by herself, single-handedly, hands over the Tesseract. Even though putting her hand on it, at least as we understood it in the movie, would probably kill her and teleport her to another dimension or, disintegrate her or something. But no, she just hands it over to the general. Yeah. And he asks, is that nuclear? Now, I'm a little bit of a stickler for historical accuracy, and I know I'm watching a cartoon, a comic book about it, but what people understood about nuclear radiation at that point in history was pretty much zilch if you were just the layman. So for this guy to worry whether or not this thing is nuclear made absolutely no sense to me. Because the atom bomb was, at best, the apple of some scientist's eye at that point. And splitting said atom and the effects of nuclear fallout and radiation were hardly known by most people. But anyway, he asks if it's nuclear. Okay, so now remember, Arnim Zola now has had no opportunity to take the Tesseract, right, and use it and its energy to create batteries and energy cells and everything to make weapons for Hydra. So Hydra is actually effectively just human beings with regular, everyday weapons. So what happens with the Tesseract? Well, Howard Stark says, I know exactly what to do with this. And we see Howard Stark with the glowing of Tesseract energy working on something. Now, I just want to say that I gave the Howard Stark of the Marvel Universe the credit of being at least as, if not smarter than, Arnim Zola. But I was wrong. And I'll tell you how much I was wrong as we proceed. Anyway, so then Howard Stark is working on something. Steve Rogers there. And then we get, apparently Bucky has been captured. We get to the scene where Bucky's been captured and his whole squad, the 107th or whatever, been captured by Hydra. Why? How? They just have. They were on a mission and they got captured. Because even though we've diverted from the movie continuity, all the exact same events have to occur in this one. I mean, nothing drastic has changed except we've just taken piece by piece these different scenes from the first movie and just put Peggy Carter in them instead of Captain America. And this is how we make a what-if issue, where everything goes more or less in the same order of events as before, just with a different character. And so what is the outcome of Peggy Carter going to save the 107th and Bucky? Well, basically the exact same events as the first one. They go busting out. Dum Dum Dugan makes some comment about, wow, what's a dame doing here? I don't think there's a scene in this show where some guy doesn't make some comment, derogatory or surprised or otherwise, about her being a girl. And yeah, you could say, oh, well, given the time. Like, yeah, you could say given the time. But they make a point over and over again, etc. Anyway, so she saves the Bucky's squad, and then there's this tank attack. And then out of nowhere comes a big iron monster. Oh my God, who is that? Destroying all these things. Why, it's the Hydra Stomper. Not Iron Man. We can't actually give Steve Rogers a name. He's just inside of the Hydra Stomper. So it's just a suit. They try to play off like, oh, you know, it's the man in the suit later, but no, it's just he's driving a vehicle. Now, here's what's special about this vehicle. And this is why I had to go back and rewind about 3/4 of the way through the episode, because I didn't understand something. Something happens later on that makes absolutely no sense. So as you look at this, I just want you to remember this image for a moment. This image is important. I didn't understand how important it was until later, when I went, the just happened. Okay, so we reveal that Steve Rogers is Iron Man. He's the Hydra Stomper. He's inside of the machine that is called the Hydra Stomper. He doesn't have a code name. It's the Hydra Stomper. And so then we get a montage of Peggy Carter and Hydra Stomper, crashing planes and blowing stuff up and winning the war single-handedly, and et cetera, et cetera. Okay. It was done to a musical number, so it was all very dramatic. Okay, but then we jump back to Castle Hydra. What's going on at Castle Hydra? Again, Hydra that now has absolutely nothing like the kind of power or influence it had before in the first version of events, when they had the Tesseract and were developing weapons and technology beyond anything anybody could see. They have their own castle. Okay. And then we do a kind of reversion, again, of the events of the first film, where the Nazi command guys are coming in and questioning Johann Schmidt / Red Skull's methods on what he's doing. And what is he doing? Well, we don't know. He's still got the wooden carving thing from somewhere, but now it's just like, I don't know. I didn't understand what was going on here. I understand now. See this thing here? Okay, so he's found some artifact, some wooden carving that indicates there's some monstrous thing. Right? Okay. So the Nazi guys are like, well, you're wasting everybody's time. We're going to shut you down. As far as I know, this is the same wood carving from the village where they took the Tesseract from. They've just now moved it to the castle. The wood carving has no powers. It has no mystical energy or thing. It's just a piece of wood. But it had carved into it something that somehow Johann Schmidt understands what it is. And so Johann Schmidt, at the being berated by the Nazi guys, he just kills them and or captures them, because now, haha, I'm the Red Skull. I'm going to take over the world. And then there's this thing. What does this mean? What does this mean? Well, here's a little cube thing, and here's a bunch of tentacles. Ooh. Foreshadowing. And then we get some romantic talk with Peggy and Steve as they kind of do the reverse of flirting with each other and promising each other a dance and going out on a date, and oh, what could happen? And then Howard Stark interrupts them. And there you go. And then we jump to, again, another scene from the first movie that we have to recreate because we couldn't possibly have events diverge significantly. So the theory here is that Red Skull himself is on this train, and so they're going to stop the train in what Peggy calls Operation Where Eagles Dare. Where Eagles Dare being a reference to a movie from like 1968, which was a World War II action-adventure movie. Why call it Where Eagles Dare in here? I don't know. I think maybe that's a quote from some piece of literature. And anyway. So we have and Bucky's still alive here, and he will be alive afterwards. So, yeah, we just have a recreation of that same scene, except that this time we've got the Hydra Stomper to physically stop the train. He's going to fly up to the train, push against it, and physically stop it. And then they all kind of swoop down onto the train. And then Steve goes to break open the train. And what's inside the train? It's a bomb! It was a trap! Oh my gosh! And so train goes boom with Steve inside. Oh my God, Steve's dead. And then just insult to injury, a big avalanche is triggered and falls on top of whatever was left of the stuff. All right, so this was Hydra's plan, right? To leak information that the Red Skull was on this train and then blow up the train. Now remember, Hydra's plan requires the Tesseract. We saw in that little wood carving, the little cube and the thing. They need the Tesseract. All right. So, yeah, Steve is lost. Everybody's sad. Now we're going to make our final strike on Hydra. And Peggy Carter is going to go interrogate Zola, but it's like Zola will never crack. And then Peggy Carter walks in, and then jump cut to her saying, he told me everything. She intimidated him or beat him up or something, whatever. Anyway, so now Zola's told her everything that he knows. And what does Zola know? What does Zola know now that he was captured with the Tesseract before he could do what he was going to do with the Tesseract? Well, what he knows beyond what he was going to do with the Tesseract, and which would never happen in the movie, is that Red Skull really intended to use the Tesseract to bring forth an evil from another dimension, which was never brought up or even alluded to in the movie, because they did not understand the Tesseract was the Space Stone. And Zola was already captured by the time we see Red Skull analyzing the carving to see the Tesseract tentacle thing. So how he would have known this, I don't know. Even in the continuity of its own storytelling, it doesn't make any sense. Anyway, so they're going to go attack and stop Hydra from doing this terrible thing. And so they go to Castle Hydra, and they attack, and the cops are coming for me again. Sing me the song of your people. Yes. Whee! Oh, come on. Keep going. Stop. I always hate when that's in the background. It feels like I have to, it like the cars have to loop around the block to go whatever direction they're going, and it always gets like louder, quieter, louder than again. Anyway, so Agent Carter and the Howling Commandos storm Castle Hydra in order to see, what's this? The Red Skull has the Tesseract. What? What? Wait a second. What? Yes, if you'll recall, as I indicated way back there, let me find that, see if I can find that still again. Where is it? Yeah, if you'll recall this image here. Boy, somebody's busy today. I can't get away from it. It's the cops. They're coming for me. This image here. So remember how I said I would have thought in the grand pantheon of Marvel scientists how Howard Stark would be at least as smart or smarter than Arnim Zola? Because Zola, what did Zola do? Well, he used the energy from the Tesseract effectively to make energy packs and batteries and all types of stuff in order to fuel Hydra's weapons. That's why every Hydra soldier in the movie had their own laser gun. You know, he was able to harness the energy to create these things. What does Howard Stark do? He puts the Tesseract in the suit. He puts the Tesseract. This is the Tesseract. It's not a battery charged with the energy from the Tesseract. No. He puts the most powerful object in the universe at that point in this singular item. He doesn't figure out how to make a battery from the energy. He doesn't figure out how to empower existing technology. No. He just takes the Tesseract and makes it the sole battery of this one item. And so when the train explodes and Steve Rogers and his suit fall to the earth, Hydra has captured the Tesseract. How could Hydra have possibly known that that plan would result in that suit falling into their hands with the Tesseract? Which, I don't know. I just get. So Howard Stark does the stupidest thing ever, right? And Hydra just happens by the luck of, I don't even know, bad writing to capture the Tesseract all in one swoop, one fell swoop. Okay, so yeah, Hydra has the Tesseract. Let's see here. Yeah, so there's the Tesseract. Hydra has it. They're opening up a portal to another dimension because they know how the Tesseract works all of a sudden for making portals, because they know that it's the Space Stone somehow. And what comes out of the portal? Well, a slightly Cthulhuoid, Lovecraftian monster tentacle thing, which I thought was kind of cool, all by itself. Anyway, so Agent Carter, Captain Carter comes in and, oh my gosh, what are you doing? But Steve, the suit is still here and Steve's alive. Even though he's like on the floor over here and they didn't see him at first for some reason. So now they go over and get him and then they power up the suit. How do they power up the suit when they don't have the Tesseract? I hope the generator can give this thing enough juice. Apparently the suit is hooked up to a generator because they need it for some, I don't know. So he gets in the suit, it powers up with the generator, and then we have a Millennium Falcon doesn't work quite at the first shot moment where it falls over. Because, you can't have the men have a heroic moment. Everything's got to be truncated with some kind of like, whoops. But then he gets up again, and now we're fighting the monster. Oh my gosh, Peggy Carter, oh no. And then she fights the monster. And then Howard Stark says something about, I might be able to fix this if I can reverse the thingamabobber jingamabobber. And she corrects him in his technical language. Agent Carter, non-scientist, corrects him in his technical mumbo-jumbo. Because, I don't know, because Howard Stark can't be an expert in something all by himself. None of the male characters in here can succeed all of their own on their lonesome. Apparently not. So anyway, big tentacle monster, and they're trying to close the portal, and they're fighting the tentacles, and then the Howling Commandos come in and start shooting it, and then they're fighting and fighting and fighting. And then Steve Rogers in his Iron Man suit, the Hydra Stomper, he gets all of the regular folk out of the way and flies them off into the woods for safety, right? And then Tentacle, and then Peggy's got to push it back through the portal all by herself, even though she's been overpowered, even though we saw, and I skipped over this part, the Red Skull was caught up by one of these tentacles and crushed. Okay, summarily crushed by one of these tentacles. Well, Peggy Carter, all by herself, who is the physical equivalent of the Red Skull, is going to push back all of the tentacles all by herself. Okay, and she does this in a big sacrifice play of, you still owe me that dance. And she pushes it all back into the portal, and the portal closes, and there's just the Tesseract left. So again, we get sort of like the end of the Captain America movie, where this time Peggy Carter is sacrificing herself by pushing the tentacles all the way through the portal and herself through the portal to be gone. Blink out, Tesseract's left over. And now I have leaf blower in the background because I can't get away from extraneous noises around here. Sorry, guys. I'll be wrapping up briefly. And then we jump to, the Avengers film. Because the Avengers film is where the Tesseract gets used to open up a portal again. See, here we go. It's opening up a portal in the modern day. And what happens? Well, Peggy Carter jumps out again from the portal, not having aged a day, with the sword in her hand that she had at the end of her adventure against the tentacles, and even bits of the tentacles falling out around her as they were chopped off. But what is going on? Well, she's in the modern day because the space stone apparently put her into stasis for 70 years. Except that's not how the space stone works. So she wasn't in the ice. She was just somehow in spatial stasis from 1 second to 70 years later. And now she's in the present day with Nick Fury and Hawkeye, and she missed her dance with Steve. And that is the end of the episode. This was not a joy to watch. This was an absolute frustration to watch, with the revisions of chronology, with the repetition of scenes we'd already seen, with the convenience of events and the stupidity of the characters. I didn't care that it was Captain Carter. I couldn't give a rip less about the whole female thing. If she should have become Captain Britain. I mean, come on. Why wouldn't she be Captain Britain? That's a whole thing. I mean, Marvel owns the rights to Captain Britain, don't they? Anyway, so as a comic book fan, when Rogue became Thor, what if Rogue had the powers of Thor? That was one of the really good issues of What If. It was a really great issue, very interesting character study and sort of morality play. It was great. I didn't care about it. It was a girl or something. That's no big deal. But all throughout this entire thing, the big thing, oh, she's a girl, she's a girl, she's a girl. So what? Nothing to do with anything. But okay, but that's the point. But other than that, they didn't even adhere to the very events or logic of the source material. So this is not a what if. This is we're going to contrive all events to perfectly serve and elevate this one character beyond the same difficulties the original character had to endure. Right? So Peggy Carter did not have to go through any kind of screening process by Erskine to see if she was worthy of being put into the experimental chamber. She lets a guy potentially bleed out on the ground in order to become the test subject for an experiment that could absolutely be recreated later. There was nothing about the circumstances of the experiment that could not have been paused and rebuilt later. They still had the serum. They still knew how to build all that stuff. No, it had to happen right then. She captures the Tesseract before it can be used to create the weapons Hydra would need to become the power that they were. So she never had to encounter that difficulty. She solves that before it even happens. And yeah, this was not a joy to watch. This was not ooh, what would happen if? That's the whole thing. The title of the thing should tell me something and make my imagination go all over the place, like, what if? But the events were so contrived and so it didn't make any sense, contradicted the very source material they were coming from, and leaned completely on, I can't believe a girl could do that. Why didn't the British military claim sovereignty over Captain Carter? Why didn't they say, like, well, it may have been your experiment, but she's our soldier? Why didn't Captain Carter lead a British Howling Commandos? Why didn't history diverge completely? This entire episode actually shows me the poverty of the imagination of the people writing it. Because they did not tell a different story. They told the same story, just with slightly altered set pieces. And as a consequence of that, it was not only frustrating to watch, but I was just kind of like, okay. And so, was there anything good about this? I mean, I liked most of the animation, even though some of the facial expressions on some of the characters looked absolutely goofy. It was nice that they got most of the original cast back to do the voices of their characters. That at least made it fit and feel a little bit more organic to everything else. They didn't get Tommy Lee Jones back, who would have probably made a better character than the one they replaced him with effectively. Stanley Tucci was there for like the 2 minutes or whatever. He had to say a couple of lines. It sounded like they got Hugo Weaving back to play Johann Schmidt, Red Skull, which was fine. And they got Toby Jones for Zola. So for the most part, the entire main cast, and Sebastian Stan and, what's his name? The guy who plays Dum Dum. I'm suddenly forgetting his name. I apologize. Was it Donahue or something, or Donahoe? No, it's Donna. I forget his name. I apologize. Anyway, almost all the main cast is back, which is nice. So, I mean, visually, it was all right. Voice cast was fine. But the story was horrible. It made no sense. The logic holes, the plot holes, the contrivances for making Peggy Carter supreme over everybody else, and never have to suffer any of the difficulties that Steve Rogers did, any of the challenges, any of the character building moments or anything. And yeah, there's only so much you can do in half an hour, but there's a lot you can do in half an hour with the proper writing and pacing. And this didn't have it. So I don't have a whole lot of hope for the other episodes oncoming, but as I've done in the past, and I was likely do in the future, I'll probably cover those as we proceed. So everyone, thank you so much for joining me for this. Sorry I didn't get more into interaction with you guys, but I do have work to go back to. If you'd like to hear more from me or Satsu 2 Cents, you can find the two of us tonight on Satsu 2 Cents' channel at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for The Lords of the Night, as we count down the final episodes of Lords of the Night, ending on August 24th with the celebration of Satsu's daughter's second birthday and the end of our little show. But with that, everyone, thank you so much for joining me. You are the greatest audience in the world and the multiverse. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very, very little to do. And everyone who donated, thank you so much for your generosity. I really do appreciate it. Everyone, have a great rest of your day. I hope you are all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.